This video will focus on what I call inner progress. And this could look like to become a better human, to build our character, to become, like specifically, less envious, more patient, and more kind, whatever we want to progress in from the inside. The strive or the struggle for self-improvement, what many of us modern humans face, humans actually faced all the time in previous times. So I found one text by Plutarch called On Moral Progress, roughly 2000 years old, which we will talk about today. And please trust me that this text is extremely applicable and also useful for our modern life, as it was probably 2000 years ago. I want to make the case for what I call the real self-improvement or inner progress. It sounds a bit catchy, or actually it is a little bit catchy, but I generally think this is what matters. Probably you are facing similar questions of how to really improve yourself from the inside out, how to build a strong character foundation like inside you. And I hope that this video can help you to measure or to recognize this inner progress. What I learned on my own journey is that when we set out to really self-improve, we can only make it by ourselves. We have to experience everything by ourselves. I'm not an expert on you, you are not an expert on me, no one is an expert on me, no one is an expert on you. We have to be our own experts. Like I can only become, and I try to be an expert on me, like to know me perfectly well, not perfectly probably, but I at least aspire to. And probably everyone can aspire to be an expert on him or herself. What is inner progress? For me, it is the focus on virtues, focusing on ethical and moral actions in our daily life. It is about improving our character, being more resilient inside, having like better thoughts or like dealing with our thoughts better, being less envious, being more patient, kinder, and those things, like etc. And this is what I call here the real self-improvement. I have the feeling we self-improve in many cases for external things. We want to be more fit, but this is for the sake of being fit or for external validation to look better. We want to be more productive, but is this for the sake of being productive or for more external success at work? Of course, not all self-improvement actions are for external purposes, being more healthy, for example. My point is that modern self-improvement is missing, in my opinion, the self-improvement of our character and thoughts. Those things are just internal. One characteristic of inner progress is that we do it for the sake of inner progress. We want to be less envious because of being less envious. When we compare inner progress to outer progress, like making more money, climbing the hierarchy, etc., we notice that outer progress is more focused on and talked about. From my experience, we can build what we want on the outside and make it as safe as possible, but when our character at the same time is weak and fragile, it doesn't matter. My point is that we probably should rethink the balance between inner progress and outer progress, that we give more importance to inner progress, building our character, which for sure will also indirectly help our outer progress. One more point of comparison. Outer progress is visible and easily measurable, but inner progress isn't. The next part of this video will deal with how we recognize and measure inner progress. Plutarch, an ancient historian and biographer, talks in his text On Moral Progress about some signs of how we can measure or recognize moral progress. And in this video, or in my opinion, we will set moral progress and inner progress as synonyms, like they are identical. The structure for the next part of the video is as follows. We take one sign of progress, which Plutarch wrote, talk shortly about it, and then I will mix my own example to make it more visual and applicable. All this is to give you a feeling of how you can practically use these signs to measure your own progress. In the quotes by Plutarch, you will often hear the word philosophy. For him, it meant something a little different from what we understand today under the word. From what I read out of him, his approach to philosophy was practical, a guide to virtuous living and ethical principles in everyday life. That means we can substitute it simply with things we want to progress in, like inner progress things, like being less envious, more self-disciplined, resisting pleasures, becoming more kind, and etc. etc. It is as if repeated effort levels the path, and as though the journey creates a light and a brightness in philosophy, to replace the perplexity, uncertainty and vacillation which students of philosophy come across at first, like sailors who left the land they know, but cannot yet see the land which is their destination, for they are in the position of having not yet become acquainted with and in possession of what is better. They are going round in circuits in the intermediate area, and in the process often turn back towards where they have come from. So what is he talking about? At first, that change itself is difficult. Let's take for example that we want to be less envious, and we can exchange here this less envious of any other domain to make inner progress. So being more patient, being more kind, and those things. So we set out to be less envy. We leave the one beach of like the envy beach where we have the certainty of how it feels to be envy. We set out in our uncertainty to go to the other beach where we are less or not envious. When we now set out and we turn around again, because this is not so easy to change, right? This is actually really difficult. We come back, we don't make progress. But when we keep pushing on and we try to reach the other beach, the uncomfortable or like uncertain feeling at least, we make progress. So when that sort of bad mood occurs only rarely, and the mind quickly steps in to cancel it out and repel it, changing defeat into victory, as it were, and has no difficulty in getting rid of the agitation and restlessness, then one ought to regard one's progress on a firm basis. Nowadays, my mind steps often in when I have envious thoughts. And this is not always perfect, but it is much, much better than in the past. In the past, my mind didn't have this automatic defense of negative thoughts or of envious thoughts in this case. This is a long journey, but it's totally good because now I know that it's much, much better to be less envious than to be envy. So when our minds or thoughts making something like this, like giving our negative intruding thoughts some automatic defense, this is already a sign of progress. Not being upset or irritated by people who name his peers and tell him how they are prospering at some royal household, or are marrying into money, or are going down to the agora as a people's choice for some political or forensic post. For anyone who is not dismayed or swayed in these circumstances has clearly been suitable and securely gripped by philosophy, since it is impossible to stop trying to conform to behavior the majority of people admire unless one has become accustomed to admire virtue instead. We all know it, comparison. Social media and our lives are full of it. But it is a sign of progress when we can resist it, when we are not like taken away by other people's opinions or by other people's progress, even like outer progress of other people. Because when we are sure with our own inner progress, when we know that we want to go our way in this inner progress, and at the same time we are not so much taken by others people's outer process, that is a sign of progress. Anyway, when the contrast between virtue and externals has enabled you to eliminate from yourself envy and jealousy of others, and all the things which commonly irritate and undermine beginners in philosophy, you can take this too as a clear indication of progress. Similar to before, when external irritations or also envy and jealousy fall more and more away, this is a way of inner progress. Analogous to this is the behavior of someone who politely does a favor and then runs around telling everyone about it. It is obvious that he is still dependent on external appreciation and drawn towards public recognition, that he does not yet have virtue in his sights. Plutarch talks about that when we do good actions or good deeds or a favor for someone and then showing it off to our family, friends, to other people or even on social media, that this is an inner progress. And I don't even mean it necessarily in a big way, like to make a really big donation or something like this. I mean even in little ways. And I was thinking to myself, hey, do I do this? I was thinking, like, of course not. But after some reflection, I figured out, yes, I do this. And like, for example, I want to be more kind. Like, I like kindness. Like, I really admire, like, internally kind people. And I want to imitate it more. When I do some kind things, more often than not, I talk to my fiancée about it. Like, I want her recognition. I want external recognition. And this is, of course, not at all how it should be. So I'm actually not at all making this inner progress because I am kind for the sake of kindness itself. Like, the pleasure is in the act of being kind and not in like getting external validation. But I think I too often want external validation in general for my things, which is of course not good. It follows that giving something to a friend and doing a favor for an acquaintance But not telling others about it is a sign of progress. So not showing our good deeds or showing our virtues off to other people is a sign of progress. A man like this gains recognition from himself, and he feels not contempt, but pleasure and contentment at being self-sufficient as a witness, and spectator too, of his good deeds. This shows that reason is now being nourished within and is taking root inside him, and that he is getting used to being his own source of pleasure, as Democritus puts it. And this is the essence, right? When we are at this point and we don't need the appreciation or the reward or the recognition or the attention, whatever, from outside, we are at a really good point. The same applies to actions as well as to words. Everyone should try to ensure that they contain more usefulness than showmanship, and are more concerned with truth than with display. If genuine love for a young man or for a woman does not seek witnesses, but reaps its harvest of pleasure, even if it fulfills its desire in secret, then it is even more likely that someone who loves goodness and wisdom, who is intimate and involved with virtue because of his actions, will be quietly self-assured within himself and will have no need of an admiring audience. This is the main thing, when we can enjoy things for its own sake. When we love someone, we don't need any external attention or recognition. We do it for the love itself. And exactly this we can just put also on or in the domain of inner progress. We want to become better inside, like not for some external validation. We don't want to become fitter, for example, because we want to look better for other people or something like that. Like it's because probably we want to feel better inside, or we want to feel better with ourselves in general without needing this external validation. And when we're at this point, when we do things for its own sake, I think then we're in a really good way. And of course, I just repeat the words by Plutarch, but then we are in a really good state, and this is a sign of progress. Attention and repeated intense effort enables people to notice and absorb implicit virtue in everything. This is more likely to happen if they supplement theory with practice, not just by studying in the school of danger, as Thucydides puts it, but also by giving themselves a practical demonstration of their views, or preferably forming their views by experience. Plutarch is talking here about the combination of theory and practice, that we can see inner progress, or that we can see virtue in theory and practice. In theory, we can, for example, read, write, or listen to some lecture, or in practice, we can see other people doing it, or of course, doing it by ourselves. And I want to take here the example of being more calm. I think many of us know a person who is like calm like a rock, or maybe even this is yourself. I'm not like this. I'm often way too reactive, and I'm not. Sometimes outside I can look calm probably, but inside I'm way too reactive. I'm way too not calm. And I noticed that my fiancée is extremely calm. Like she's also inside just calm. And I set out to myself, hey, Dennis, you want to be more calm. So, of course, I was reading about it and those things, but also what Plutarch said, that we recognize it at some point in others when we are like going on in our journey. So I literally recognized it in my girlfriend. Of course, this is not so hard to oversee, but this is really motivating when we have another example exactly in front of our eyes. When we set out to do something, like in my case here now, being more calm, we often don't just see it in theory, but we often also see it in practice, like from other people, or even, I think the best exercise is then to just practice it by ourselves. Those whose progress is ongoing are capable of benefiting and of gathering what is congruent and useful, not just from the written or spoken word, but from any side and any situation at all. So a sign of progress is when we not just learn from the written word or the spoken word, but also when we see the desired virtue, or the desired inner progress in other people, or experience it by ourselves, and then we progress in all of it. And the more a person denies any defects, the more he immerses and imprisons himself in the vice. It is obvious that anyone who is poor, but who pretends to be rich, increases his poverty by his masquerade. I talked in the chapter before that I'm sometimes not so calm as I want to be. I'm more reactive, so I'm sometimes more angry than I want to be, or more annoyed than I want to be. And the worst thing then we could do is to not admit our failure. Like it's to admit that I would say, no, not at all, I'm not angry, or not at all annoyed. Like far away from that. But this is like really the worst thing. So the first step is really to just admit or be aware that like the first step is to be aware of our failure, and the second step I would say is to admit it. And exactly this admitting failure is like I would say not just a sign of progress, but also a sign of strength, that we can see, hey, we really have some faults. It is to have stopped regarding any of one's faults as trivial, and instead to take rough care about and to pay attention to all of them. If someone scarcely gives in to what's the point, and that it's for now, better next time, but applies himself on every occasion and gets fed up and irritated if vice ever worms its way, with its excuses, into even the slightest of his faults, then he is obviously in the process of acquiring for himself a certain purity and wants to avoid being defiled in any way whatsoever. On the other hand, thinking that nothing is, or can be, especially discreditable, makes people nonchalant and careless about the little things. It's all about principle. Let's take the example of not drinking alcohol. So, when we are invited to a big party, I think it's not so hard to put off the alcohol, because the sheer amount of alcohol consumed is what puts us off, and we can stay with our principles. But I think the problem arises, and also as Plutarch there said, is when we are, for example, with friends, and they're saying, oh come, just one glass of wine, or just like one sip even, or just one bottle of beer, or something like that, where like it's the little things, right? And the little things are those things which we have to be careful. And when we are able to resist those little things, like this little, let's say, bad pleasures, but like because it's against our principle, then we are on our way to progress. Now, we have said that translating decisions into actions and not allowing words to be just words without turning them into deeds is particularly typical of progress. When we set out to self-improve, the talking is easy, but the hard part is when we also do the action after the talking. Because it is literally a sign of progress when we immediately let action follow our words, because what we say, we do. And the hard part is to take action, because we are self-responsible. We can't read about it. We can't listen about it. We have to experience it. And it is not just actions in like external actions, it is also like actions in our minds. Like only we can, let's say, fight in our heads, sometimes against our own thoughts, to suppress them or to negotiate with them or whatever, right? And I think this is an important part, like Plutarch thinks this is an important part, that the degree, like the more we let actions follow our words in the domain of like inner progress, we make, well, this is a sign of inner progress. One thing what can help us in our self-improvement or inner progress journey is to hold other people or great examples in front of us as a mirror. What would they do? Would they give in? Would they compromise their values or principles? The notion of the mirror takes a simple idea of using a mirror to adjust our clothing and comb our hair and applies it to the moral realm. As he, Plutarch, writes elsewhere, good men should always be before our eyes, and we should ask ourselves, what would Epaminondas have said? How would Lycurgus or Agesilaus have conducted himself? This way, these good men are like a mirror, before which one puts oneself in order, adjusts one's stance, refrains from a petty saying, or resists some emotion. The lives of good men call to our attention our weaknesses and errors to improve, as well as encouraging us in what we do well. The self-examination, which is necessary for moral growth, is facilitated by observing the effects of virtues in others, thus being stimulated to emulate them, by Robin Waterfield in the introduction to Plutarch's Lives. Another way is to inverse the mirror and to not use it for role models, but for anti-models. People focus on role models. It is more effective to find anti-models, people you don't want to resemble when you grow up, by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. For me, both ways are functioning, and from time to time I use both ways. Like one example, like in my case of course, everyone has their own role models or anti-models, so to speak, is for example Charlie Munger, especially his like philosophy or his mindset on loss and on envy, for example. Like he totally rules out envy because this is the only emotion we can not have any fun in. And this is totally correct, like also in my opinion. And sometimes I had really, like I was envy and I said, what would Charlie Munger now do? Would he think the same? Or I want to complain and I asked myself, what would he do? Would he complain now? And like, he wanted to have like pity now? No. And the answer was actually oftentimes always no. So I followed a little bit his advice, even if I just read about him in words, right? We often don't know our role models. Of course, it can be that our role models are our parents or grandparents or people we know around. But in my case, it is most that my role models or also anti-models are people I don't know actually personally, but who have often like a public persona. Now I'm really interested. When you think of self-improvement, like how do you define it? When self-improvement comes to your mind, what do you think first about? Do you agree with my way of showing the real self-improvement, which is of course a little bit catchy? Or do you think this is not right this is not like for you, or this is not the way self-improvement should be? Like, I would really appreciate it if you could give me some comments, or we could discuss in the comments, or also when you have some feedback, positive or negative, to this video. Do you like it? Do you don't like it? Could you take value out of it? This is really the most important thing. You spent this time to watch this video, so thank you for it. But do you think this time was well invested? If yes, you could let me know. If no, also please let me know. And when you have some feedback what I could do better, it would be really great if you could write it down or just write me per email, something like that. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. And as always, I wish you a fantastic day.